They called me the poor relative until they saw my name on the deed. The words echoed in my mind as I sat in the back row of the funeral parlor, watching my wealthy cousins file past great Aunt Millicent's casket in their designer black dresses and expensive suits. I wore the only black dress. I owned a simple polyester blend from Target that I'd bought 3 years ago for my college graduation. It was wrinkled because I didn't own an iron, and the hem was slightly uneven because I'd altered it myself. Poor little Sarah, I heard my cousin Victoria whisper to her sister Amanda as they passed my row, still shopping at discount stores. I see. Amanda's laugh was like crystal breaking. Well, what do you expect? She's always been the charity case of the family. I kept my eyes fixed on my hands, folded in my lap, and tried to ignore the familiar sting of their words. At 25, I had grown accustomed to being the family disappointment, the one who had chosen social work over business, who lived in a studio apartment instead of a mansion, who drove a 15-year-old Honda instead of a luxury car. The Blackwood family had money. Old money, new money, and everything in between. My grandfather had built a real estate empire in the 1960s, and his children had expanded it into hotels, restaurants, and shopping centers. Everyone in my generation had followed the family tradition except me. I was the daughter of my father's younger brother, Uncle Tom, who had died in a car accident when I was 12. My mother had remarried and moved to Florida, leaving me to be raised by various relatives who saw me as an obligation rather than a blessing. I had bounced between households throughout high school, always the outsider, always the burden, always reminded that I was there out of charity rather than love. Great Aunt Millicent had been different. She was my grandfather's sister, a spinster who had never married and had no children of her own. While the rest of the family saw her as an eccentric old woman who hoarded antiques and lived alone in a crumbling Victorian mansion, I had seen her as the only person who truly understood what it meant to be an outsider in the Blackwood family. I had visited her regularly throughout college, helping her with grocery shopping and household repairs that she couldn't manage on her own. We would sit in her cluttered living room, drinking tea from china cups that were probably worth more than my monthly rent. And she would tell me stories about the family's history, stories that painted a very different picture than the sanitized version everyone else preferred. The Blackwoods weren't always wealthy, she had told me once. Your great-grandfather started with nothing and built everything through hard work and determination. But somewhere along the way, his children forgot where they came from. They started believing that money made them better than other people. Is that why you never married into the business? I had asked. I never married at all, she had said with a sad smile. I was too independent for the men of my generation and too poor for the men who interested me. But I never regretted it. I'd rather be alone and authentic than married and pretending to be someone I'm not. Now, as I watched the funeral service for this remarkable woman, I felt a profound sense of loss. Great Aunt Millicent had been the only person in my family who had ever made me feel valued for who I was, rather than criticized for who I wasn't. The service was brief and impersonal. The pastor, who had clearly never met Millicent, read generic platitudes about her long life and generous spirit. My cousins dabbed at their eyes with expensive handkerchiefs. But I suspected their tears were more about the inheritance they were expecting than genuine grief for the woman they had barely visited in the last decade. After the service, we gathered at the law offices of Pemberton, Hayes and Associates for the reading of the will. The conference room was elegant and intimidating, with dark wood paneling and leather chairs that probably cost more than my monthly salary. Mr. Pemberton, the senior partner, was a distinguished man in his 70s who had been handling the Blackwood family's legal affairs for decades. He arranged his papers carefully and looked around the room at the assembled relatives. Before we begin, he said, I want to note that Millicent Blackwood was very specific about who should be present for this reading. She requested that only direct family members be included. I looked around the room and counted 12 people, my various aunts, uncles, and cousins, all of whom had much stronger claims to Millicent's affection and fortune than I did. I wondered why I had been included at all. Millicent's estate is substantial, Mr. Pemberton continued. In addition to her home and personal belongings, she leaves behind investment portfolios, real estate holdings, and cash assets totaling approximately $8 million. A collective intake of breath filled the room. Even for a family accustomed to wealth, $8 million was a significant sum. The bulk of the estate, Mr. Pemberton said, has been divided among her surviving relatives according to her wishes. He began reading the bequests: $100,000 to my Uncle Robert, $150,000 to my Aunt Catherine, smaller amounts to various cousins and their children. Each bequest was met with polite murmurs of gratitude, though I could see the calculations happening behind everyone's eyes as they tried to figure out how much would be left for the major inheritance. To my great-nieces, Victoria and Amanda Blackwood, Mr. Pemberton read, I leave $200,000 each to be used for their continued education and personal development. Victoria and Amanda exchanged satisfied glances. As the most successful of the younger generation, Victoria was a real estate developer, Amanda a corporate lawyer. They had clearly expected to be major beneficiaries. To my nephew Charles Blackwood, the lawyer continued, I leave my collection of antique furniture and artwork, valued at approximately $300,000. Uncle Charles nodded approvingly. He was an art dealer who would know exactly how to monetize Millicent's collection. The bequests continued. Each one met with varying degrees of satisfaction or disappointment. I sat quietly in my chair, expecting nothing, and trying not to feel hurt when my name wasn't called. Of course, Millicent wouldn't leave me anything significant. I was just the poor relative who had helped her with errands. Finally, Mr. Pemberton said, we come to the disposition of the primary residence and the remainder of the estate. This was the moment everyone had been waiting for. Millicent's house was a magnificent Victorian mansion in the historic district, easily worth $2 million. Combined with whatever remained of her liquid assets, this would be the real prize. To my great-niece Sarah Elizabeth Blackwood, Mr. Pemberton read, I leave my home at 1247 Magnolia Street, along with all remaining assets not specifically bequeathed to other parties. The silence that followed was deafening. I stared at the lawyer, certain I had misheard him. I'm sorry, Victoria said, her voice sharp with disbelief. Did you say Sarah? That is correct, Mr. Pemberton replied calmly. Sarah Elizabeth Blackwood is the primary beneficiary of Millicent Blackwood's estate. That's impossible, Amanda said, standing up from her chair. Sarah isn't even really part of the family. She's just the poor relative we've been supporting out of charity. I assure you, the will is quite clear and legally binding, Mr. Pemberton said. Miss Sarah Blackwood inherits the house and approximately $5 million in remaining assets. The room erupted in protests and accusations. Uncle Robert demanded to see the will. Aunt Catherine suggested that Millicent hadn't been of sound mind. Victoria accused me of manipulating a lonely old woman. Through it all, I sat in stunned silence, trying to process what I had just heard. $5 million. The house, everything that remained of Great-Aunt Millicent's life, was now mine. This is ridiculous, Uncle Charles said, his face red with anger. Sarah doesn't know the first thing about managing that kind of money. She squandered it within a year. She's never even had a real job, Victoria added. She works for some nonprofit, making $30,000 a year. What could she possibly do with $5 million? Perhaps, Mr. Pemberton said quietly, that's exactly why Millicent chose her. He reached into his briefcase and withdrew a sealed envelope. Miss Blackwood left this letter for Sarah, to be read after the will. With trembling hands, I took the envelope and opened it. Inside was a handwritten letter in Millicent's careful script. My dearest Sarah, if you are reading this, then you have just learned that you are now a very wealthy young woman. I imagine you are as surprised as everyone else in that room, and I imagine they are not taking the news well. I want you to understand why I made this choice. Over the past few years, as I watched our family, I realized that most of them had forgotten what really matters in life. They measure success by bank accounts and status symbols. They judge worth by net worth. They have become exactly the kind of people your great-grandfather would have despised. But you, my dear girl, are different. You chose a career helping others instead of helping yourself. You visited an old woman not because you expected something in return, but because you genuinely cared. You listened to my stories and treated me like a person rather than an inconvenience. You are the only one in this family who understands that money is a tool, not a goal. You are the only one who has shown genuine kindness without expecting a reward. You are the only one who deserves to carry on the true Blackwood legacy, not the legacy of wealth, but the legacy of compassion and integrity. I know this inheritance will change your life, and I hope it will change you for the better. But I also hope you will remember that the most valuable things in life cannot be bought or sold. Use this money wisely, help others as you have helped me, and never let wealth corrupt the beautiful soul that made me love you like the daughter I never had. All my love, Gratant, Millicent. P.S. The deed to the house is in the safe behind the painting of the roses in the library. The combination is your birthday, April 15th, 98. By the time I finished reading, tears were streaming down my face. The room had fallen silent as everyone watched me, probably calculating how they could contest the will or convince me to share the inheritance. Well, Victoria demanded, what does it say? I folded the letter carefully and put it back in the envelope. It says that she loved me, I said quietly. Love doesn't pay inheritance taxes, Uncle Robert said coldly. Sarah, you need to be practical about this. You can't possibly manage an estate this size on your own. We could help you, Amanda offered, though her tone suggested the help would come with strings attached. We could set up a trust fund, manage the investments, make sure you don't make any costly mistakes. For a reasonable fee, of course, Uncle Charles added. I looked around the room at these people who had spent my entire life making me feel small and worthless. They had called me the poor relative, the charity case, the family disappointment. They had made it clear that I didn't belong in their world of wealth and privilege. But now, suddenly, they wanted to help me. Now, suddenly, I was worth their attention. Thank you for the offer, I said, standing up from my chair, but I think I can manage on my own. Sarah, be reasonable, Aunt Catherine said. You don't understand what you're dealing with. This kind of money comes with responsibilities, obligations, tax implications. Then I'll learn, I said firmly. I'll hire my own lawyers, my own accountants, my own financial advisors, people who work for me, not for the family that spent 25 years treating me like a burden. The silence that followed was heavy with shock and resentment. These people who had never taken me seriously were suddenly realizing that I was no longer under their control. You're making a mistake, Victoria said, her voice cold. You're going to regret this. Maybe, I said, walking toward the door. But it will be my mistake to make. As I left the law office, I could hear the angry voices behind me, already planning how to contest the will or find ways to challenge my inheritance. But for the first time in my life, I didn't care what they thought. I was no longer the poor relative. I was Sarah Elizabeth Blackwood, and I owned a mansion and $5 million. More importantly, I owned my own future. The deed was waiting for me in Great Aunt Millicent's safe, and with it, the key to a life I had never dared to imagine. I drove to Millicent's house, my house now, in a daze, still trying to process what had happened. The Victorian mansion sat on 2 acres in the most exclusive part of town, surrounded by ancient oak trees and meticulously maintained gardens. I had always admired it from the outside, but I had never thought of it as something I could own. The key was where Millicent had always kept it, under the 3rd flower pot on the front porch. As I unlocked the door and stepped inside, I felt like I was entering a different world, one where I belonged, not as a visitor, but as the owner. The house was exactly as I remembered it, cluttered with antiques, filled with the scent of old books and lavender sachets, every surface covered with photographs and mementos from a long life. But now, instead of feeling like an intruder, I felt like I was coming home. I made my way to the library, a cozy room lined with floor-to-ceiling bookshelves and dominated by a massive mahogany desk. The painting of roses that Millicent had mentioned hung behind the desk, and I carefully lifted it to reveal a wall safe. My hands were shaking as I entered my birthday into the combination lock. The safe opened with a soft click, revealing stacks of documents, jewelry boxes, and a manila envelope marked for Sarah. Inside the envelope was the deed to the house, along with bank statements, investment portfolios, and a detailed inventory of Millicent's assets. As I spread the papers across the desk, the reality of my inheritance began to sink in. The house was worth $2.3 million. The investment accounts totaled $4.8 million. There were also smaller assets, jewelry, artwork, antiques that added another $300,000 to the total. All told, I was looking at an inheritance worth over $7 million. $7 million. The number was so large it felt abstract, like monopoly money rather than real wealth. My phone rang, startling me out of my calculations. It was my mother, calling from Florida. "Sarah, honey, I just heard the most incredible news from your Aunt Catherine. Is it true that Millicent left you her house?" "It's true, Mom. She left me everything." There was a long pause. "Everything." "Sarah, what are you talking about?" I explained what had happened at the lawyer's office, the reading of the will, the letter from Millicent. My mother listened in stunned silence. $7 million, she said finally. "Oh my God, Sarah, you're rich." "I guess I am. What are you going to do? Are you going to quit your job? Move into the house?" This changes everything, doesn't it? I looked around the library, at the books that Millicent had collected over a lifetime, at the photographs of family members who had long since passed away. "I don't know, Mom. I'm still trying to process it all." "Well, you need to be careful. Money like that, it changes people. And it makes other people act differently around you. You're going to find out who your real friends are." She wasn't wrong. Within hours of leaving the lawyer's office, my phone had started ringing constantly. Cousins, who hadn't spoken to me in years, suddenly wanted to have lunch. Family members who had barely acknowledged my existence were calling to congratulate me and offer their help managing my windfall. The most persistent caller was my cousin Victoria, who left 3 voicemails in the span of 2 hours. "Sarah, it's Victoria. I know we didn't part on the best terms today, but I want you to know that I'm here for you. This inheritance is a huge responsibility, and I have experience with large-scale financial management. Call me back so we can talk about setting up some safeguards for your money." The second message was more urgent. "Sarah, I've been thinking about your situation, and I'm really concerned. There are going to be people who try to take advantage of you now that you're wealthy. You need professional guidance, and you need it fast. I can recommend some excellent financial advisors who work with high-net-worth individuals." The third message dropped the pretense of concern. "Sarah, you're being foolish by not returning my calls. Whether you like it or not, you're part of this family, and we have a responsibility to make sure you don't squander Aunt Millicent's legacy. Call me back immediately." I deleted all 3 messages without responding. Instead, I spent the evening exploring my new home, room by room, trying to understand what Millicent had left me. The house was a treasure trove of family history, photo albums dating back to the 1920s, letters from relatives who had died decades ago, business documents that told the story of how the Blackwood fortune had been built. In the master bedroom, I found Millicent's personal papers, medical records, insurance policies, and a detailed will that had been updated just 6 months before her death. She had been very deliberate about her choices, consulting with multiple lawyers and financial advisors to ensure that her wishes would be carried out exactly as she intended. There was also a journal, leather-bound, and filled with Millicent's thoughts about the family and her decision about the inheritance. I sat on her bed, my bed now, and read her final entries. March 15th, had lunch with Sarah today. She brought groceries and helped me organize the medicine cabinet. She never asks for anything, never hints about money or inheritance. She just comes because she cares. How different she is from the others, who visit only when they want something. April 2nd, Victoria called today, ostensibly to check on my health, but really to fish for information about my will. She suggested that I might want to consider consolidating my assets to make them easier to manage. Translation: she wants me to give her control of my money while I'm still alive. April 20th made my final decision about the inheritance. Sarah is the only one who has shown genuine love without expectation of reward. She is the only one who understands that wealth should be used to help others, not just to accumulate more wealth. The family will be furious, but I believe I am making the right choice. May 1st, updated my will today. Mr. Pemberton tried to talk me out of leaving everything to Sarah, worried about family discord. But I told him that sometimes discord is necessary to reveal truth. The family has treated Sarah as a charity case for too long. Now she will have the power to choose how she wants to be treated. I closed the journal and sat in the quiet house, feeling the weight of Millicent's expectations. She hadn't just left me money, she had left me a mission. She wanted me to prove that wealth could be used for good, that I could rise above the family's materialistic values and create something meaningful with my inheritance. But I also felt overwhelmed by the responsibility. I was 25 years old, with a degree in social work and no experience managing large amounts of money. How was I supposed to handle investment portfolios and tax obligations and all the other complexities that came with being wealthy? The next morning, I called in sick to work and spent the day researching financial advisors, estate lawyers, and tax accountants. I wanted to find professionals who would work for me rather than with my family, people who would respect my values and help me use my inheritance wisely. I also started thinking about what I wanted to do with my new wealth. The social worker in me was drawn to philanthropic causes. There were so many organizations that could benefit from significant donations, but I also wanted to honor Millicent's memory and find ways to use the money that would have made her proud. My phone rang constantly throughout the day. Family members, friends from college who had somehow heard the news. Even reporters from the local newspaper who wanted to write about the surprise heiress. I stopped answering calls from numbers I didn't recognize and let most of the family calls go to voicemail. But when my supervisor from work called, I picked up. "Sarah, I heard some incredible news," Janet said. "Is it true that you inherited millions of dollars from your internet?" "It's true," I said, wondering how the news had spread so quickly. "Well, congratulations. This must be life-changing for you." "It is." "Janet, I need to take some time off to figure out what this means for my future. I might not be coming back to work." There was a pause. "I understand. But Sarah, I hope you'll consider staying involved with our mission somehow. You have such a passion for helping people, and now you have resources that could make a real difference." She was right. My job at the Community Action Center paid poorly, but it had given me purpose and satisfaction. I worked with families in crisis, helping them find housing, access social services, and navigate bureaucratic systems. It was challenging work, but it was also deeply meaningful. Now I had the resources to do that work on a much larger scale. I could fund programs, start foundations, make grants to organizations that were doing important work but struggling with limited budgets. That afternoon, I drove to the Community Action Center to clean out my desk and say goodbye to my colleagues. The small office was buzzing with excitement about my inheritance, apparently. Janet had shared the news with the entire staff. "Sarah," my coworker Maria called out when she saw me. "Is it true? Are you really a millionaire now?" "It's true," I said, feeling strange about admitting it. "That's amazing. What are you going to do with all that money?" "I'm still figuring that out." "Well, don't forget about us little people when you're living in your mansion," she said with a laugh, but I detected a note of something else in her voice, envy, maybe, or resentment. As I packed up my personal belongings, I realized that my relationships with everyone were going to change now. People would see me differently, treat me differently, expect different things from me. The comfortable anonymity of being middle class was gone forever. My phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. "Sarah, this is Amanda. We need to talk. The family is planning to contest the will. You need to understand what you're up against." I stared at the message, feeling a familiar knot of anxiety in my stomach. Of course they were going to contest the will. Of course they weren't going to accept that the poor relative had inherited the family fortune. But then I thought about Millicent's letter, about her faith in me, about her belief that I was the only one who could be trusted with her legacy. I thought about the deed in the safe, legally transferring ownership of the house to me. I thought about the bank accounts and investment portfolios that were now in my name. I deleted Amanda's text without responding. Instead, I called the law firm that Mr. Pemberton had recommended for estate planning. If my family wanted a fight, they were going to get one. But this time, I wouldn't be fighting as the poor relative who depended on their charity. This time, I would be fighting as Sarah Elizabeth Blackwood, heiress to a $7 million fortune and owner of the most beautiful house in town. The deed was in my name, and no amount of family pressure was going to change that. The call came at 7 in the morning, 3 days after the will reading. I was still staying at my old apartment, not quite ready to move into Millicent's house permanently when my phone rang with an unknown number. Miss Blackwood, this is James Morrison from Morrison, Klein & Associates. I represent several members of your family in a legal matter concerning your great-aunt's estate. I sat up in bed, instantly awake. What kind of legal matter? Your cousins, Victoria and Amanda Blackwood, along with your uncles Robert and Charles, have retained our services to contest Millicent Blackwood's will. They believe there are grounds to challenge the validity of the document. On what grounds? Undue influence, lack of mental capacity, and improper execution of the will. They're prepared to file a formal challenge unless we can reach an amicable settlement. I felt my heart racing, but I tried to keep my voice steady. What kind of settlement are they proposing? They're willing to allow you to keep the house and $1 million from the estate, with the remaining assets to be distributed among the family according to what they believe were your great-aunt's true intentions. And if I refuse, then we'll see you in court, Miss Blackwood. I should warn you that contesting a will can be a lengthy and expensive process, even if you ultimately prevail. The legal fees could consume a significant portion of your inheritance. After he hung up, I sat in my small apartment, looking around at the secondhand furniture and thrift store decorations that had defined my life for the past few years. $1 million was more money than I had ever dreamed of having, but it was a fraction of what Millicent had actually left me. And more importantly, accepting their settlement would mean admitting that they were right, that I didn't deserve the full inheritance. That I was still just the poor relative who should be grateful for whatever scraps the family decided to throw my way. I called the estate attorney that Mr. Pemberton had recommended, a sharp woman named Elizabeth Chen, who specialized in will contests and inheritance disputes. They're trying to intimidate you, she said after I explained the situation. It's a common tactic. They're hoping you'll be so overwhelmed by the prospect of a legal battle that you'll accept a settlement rather than fight for what's rightfully yours. Do they have a case? From what you've told me about your relationship with your great-aunt and the circumstances surrounding the will, I doubt it, but we'll need to gather evidence to support your position. Can you document your visits with Millicent? Do you have witnesses who can testify about her mental state and her feelings toward the family? I thought about the years of grocery shopping trips, the afternoons spent listening to family stories, the countless small kindnesses that had characterized my relationship with Millicent. I had never documented these interactions because I had never expected them to be legally relevant. I have some evidence, I said. Photos, text messages, receipts from errands I ran for her, and there are people who saw us together, neighbors, shopkeepers, her doctor. Good. We'll need all of that. I also want to depose your family members about their own relationships with Millicent. If they're claiming she was mentally incompetent, we need to establish why they didn't intervene during her lifetime if they were so concerned about her welfare. Over the next 2 weeks, I threw myself into preparing for the legal battle. Elizabeth Chen and her team helped me compile evidence of my close relationship with Millicent, photographs of us together at family gatherings, text messages where she thanked me for my help, receipts showing that I had been buying her groceries and running errands for years. We also gathered evidence of the family's neglect. Millicent's phone records showed that Victoria and Amanda had called her less than once a month in the year before her death. Her calendar revealed that most family members visited only on holidays or special occasions. Her medical records showed that I was the only family member listed as an emergency contact. But the most damaging evidence came from Millicent herself. In addition to the journal I had found, Elizabeth's team discovered that Millicent had been keeping detailed records of her interactions with family members. She had documented every visit, every phone call, every request for money or favors. The picture that emerged was of a lonely old woman who was valued by her family primarily for her wealth. Victoria had asked for a loan to expand her real estate business. Amanda had requested funding for her law firm's new offices. Uncle Robert had suggested that Millicent might want to invest in his restaurant chain. Uncle Charles had repeatedly offered to help her manage her art collection. Only I had visited without asking for anything. The depositions were brutal. Elizabeth Chen systematically dismantled my family's claims, forcing them to admit that they had rarely visited Millicent, that they had no evidence of mental incapacity, and that their primary concern seemed to be financial rather than emotional. When was the last time you had a meaningful conversation with Millicent Blackwood about something other than money or inheritance? Elizabeth asked Victoria during her deposition. Victoria struggled to answer. We talked about many things. Family matters, her health, ... double quotes. Can you give me a specific example, a particular conversation you remember? Well, it's hard to remember specific conversations, ... double quotes. But you remember asking her for a loan of $500,000 to expand your business, don't you? That was a legitimate business opportunity that would have benefited the entire family. I see. And when she declined to provide that loan, how did you respond? Victoria's lawyer objected, but the damage was done. The depositions revealed a pattern of family members who saw Millicent as a source of funding rather than a person deserving of love and respect. Meanwhile, the witnesses we called painted a very different picture of my relationship with Millicent. Her neighbor, Mrs. Patterson, testified that she saw me at the house at least twice a week, often carrying groceries or helping with yard work. Dr. Williams, Millicent's physician, confirmed that she had been mentally sharp until the very end and had spoken fondly of me during her medical appointments. She always lit up when she talked about Sarah, Dr. Williams testified. She said Sarah was the only family member who visited because she cared. Not because she wanted something. The pharmacist at the local drugstore testified that I had been picking up Millicent's prescriptions for over 2 years. The manager at the grocery store confirmed that I had been shopping for her regularly. Even the mailman testified that he had often seen me at the house, helping Millicent with various tasks. But the most powerful testimony came from Father Martinez, the priest at Millicent's church. He revealed that Millicent had spoken with him extensively about her decision to leave her estate to me. She was very thoughtful about it, he testified. She said she had been watching her family for years, and she was disappointed by their materialism and lack of genuine affection. She said Sarah was different, that Sarah had a good heart and would use the money to help others. Did she express any doubts about her decision? Elizabeth asked. None at all. She said it was the most important decision she had ever made, and she was completely confident that she was doing the right thing. As the legal battle progressed, I began to see a different side of my family. The polite facades they had always maintained crumbled under the pressure of litigation. Victoria accused me of being a gold digger who had manipulated a vulnerable old woman. Amanda suggested that I had isolated Millicent from the rest of the family to gain her favor. Uncle Robert claimed that I had no right to inherit money that had been in the family for generations. Their true feelings about me, feelings they had hidden behind polite condescension for years, came pouring out in court documents and depositions. They didn't just want the money, they wanted to put me back in my place as the poor relative who should be grateful for whatever charity they chose to provide. But I was no longer that person. The inheritance had given me more than money. It had given me power, confidence, and the resources to fight back against people who had spent my entire life making me feel small. 6 months after the will contest began, Elizabeth Chen called with news. "They want to settle," she said. "They're offering to drop the challenge if you agree to give each of the 4 plaintiffs $500,000 from the estate." "That's $2 million, I said. "Why would I agree to that?" "Because going to trial is expensive and uncertain. Even though I think we have a strong case, juries can be unpredictable. This way, you keep $5 million and the house, and you avoid the stress and publicity of a trial." I thought about the offer. $2 million was a lot of money, but it was also a lot less than what they had originally demanded. More importantly, accepting the settlement would mean admitting that their challenge had merit, that I didn't fully deserve Millicent's inheritance. What do you think I should do? That's not my decision to make, but I will say this: your great aunt left you that money for a reason. She trusted you to use it wisely and to stand up for what's right. What do you think she would want you to do? I thought about Millicent's letter, about her faith in me, about her disappointment in the family's materialism. I thought about the years of being treated as a charity case, of being made to feel like I didn't belong, of being dismissed and diminished by people who measured worth by wealth. "No settlement," I said. "We're going to trial. Are you sure? This could get ugly." "It's already ugly, but I'm not backing down. Millicent left me that money because she believed in me. I'm not going to let them take it away." The trial was scheduled for the following month. As news of the family disputes spread through our small town, I found myself at the center of a media circus. Local newspapers ran stories about the Blackwood family feud. Society columnists speculated about the surprise heiress who had inherited millions. Social media buzzed with opinions about whether I deserved the inheritance, or whether the family's challenge was justified. Through it all, I tried to stay focused on what really mattered: honoring Millicent's memory and proving that her faith in me had been justified. The deed to the house remained in my name, locked away in a safe deposit box that only I could access. Whatever happened in court, that piece of paper represented more than just property ownership. It represented my transformation from the poor relative to someone who belonged, someone who mattered, someone who couldn't be dismissed or diminished anymore. The trial would determine whether I kept the full inheritance. But the deed had already given me something more valuable: the knowledge that I was worthy of love and respect, regardless of what my family thought. The courtroom was packed on the first day of trial. Local media had turned the Blackwood family dispute into a sensation, framing it as a David versus Goliath story, the poor relative fighting against the wealthy family establishment. I sat at the plaintiff's table with Elizabeth Chen, trying to project confidence while my stomach churned with anxiety. Across the aisle, Victoria, Amanda, Uncle Robert, and Uncle Charles sat with their legal team, looking every inch the successful, entitled family they had always been. They wore expensive suits and carried themselves with the arrogance of people who had never been denied anything they wanted. The judge, the Honorable Margaret Thornton, was a stern woman in her 60s who had a reputation for running an efficient courtroom and having little patience for frivolous litigation. She looked over her glasses at both legal teams as they prepared their opening statements. "This is a will contest," she announced to the packed courtroom. "The plaintiffs claim that Millicent Blackwood's will is invalid due to undue influence, lack of mental capacity, and improper execution. The defendant, Sarah Blackwood, maintains that the will is valid and reflects her great-aunt's true intentions. We will hear evidence on both sides and determine the validity of this document." The family's attorney, James Morrison, stood to deliver his opening statement. He was a polished litigator who specialized in high-stakes inheritance disputes, and he immediately went on the attack. "Ladies and gentlemen of the jury," he began, "this case is about a vulnerable elderly woman who was manipulated by a calculating young relative who saw an opportunity for financial gain. Sarah Blackwood systematically isolated Millicent Blackwood from her family, gained her trust through false pretenses, and used that trust to convince her to change her will in Sarah's favor. He painted a picture of me as a gold digger who had preyed on a lonely old woman, visiting her not out of love but out of greed. He suggested that I had deliberately driven a wedge between Millicent and the rest of the family, making her believe that they didn't care about her so that she would turn to me instead. The evidence will show, Morrison continued, that Sarah Blackwood had no meaningful relationship with Millicent Blackwood until she learned about the size of her great-aunt's estate. The evidence will show that she manipulated a woman suffering from increasing isolation and declining mental faculties. And the evidence will show that the will she convinced Millicent to sign does not reflect the true intentions of a woman who loved her entire family. When Elizabeth Chen stood to deliver our opening statement, the courtroom fell silent. She was smaller in stature than Morrison, but she commanded attention with her quiet intensity. "Ladies and gentlemen," she began, "you're going to hear a very different story in this courtroom. You're going to hear about a young woman who visited her great-aunt not because she expected anything in return, but because she genuinely cared. You're going to hear about a family that treated an elderly woman as a source of funding rather than a person deserving of love and respect. And you're going to hear about a wise old woman who made a deliberate, thoughtful decision about how to distribute her wealth." Elizabeth outlined our defense, that Millicent had been mentally competent until her death, that she had made her decision based on years of observation of her family's behavior, and that I had earned her affection through genuine care and attention rather than manipulation. "The evidence will show," Elizabeth said, "that Sarah Blackwood was the only family member who visited Millicent regularly without asking for money, loans, or favors. The evidence will show that Millicent Blackwood was disappointed by her family's materialism and chose to leave her estate to the one person who had shown her unconditional love." The first week of trial focused on establishing Millicent's mental state in the months before her death. The family's medical expert testified that elderly people are often susceptible to undue influence, especially when they're isolated from their families. But Dr. Williams, Millicent's longtime physician, contradicted this testimony. "Millicent Blackwood was one of the sharpest people I knew," he testified. "She was reading voraciously, managing her own finances, and making complex decisions about her investments right up until her death. There was absolutely no evidence of cognitive decline or mental incapacity." The family's attorney tried to suggest that Millicent's decision to leave her estate to me was evidence of impaired judgment, but Dr. Williams pushed back. "A person's decision to leave their money to someone who showed them kindness, rather than to relatives who ignored them, doesn't indicate mental incapacity," he said. "It indicates good judgment." The second week focused on the family's relationship with Millicent. One by one, Elizabeth called my relatives to the stand and forced them to admit the truth about their interactions with their elderly aunt. Victoria was forced to acknowledge that she had visited Millicent only 6 times in the year before her death, and that 4 of those visits had involved requests for financial assistance. Amanda admitted that she had called Millicent primarily when she needed legal advice for her practice. Uncle Robert conceded that he had suggested multiple business investments that would have benefited him financially. "Did you ever visit your aunt just to spend time with her?" Elizabeth asked Uncle Charles during his cross-examination. "Of course I did. We had a close relationship." "Can you describe a specific visit where you didn't discuss business or ask for her help with something?" Uncle Charles struggled to answer. "Well, we always talked about many things, ... I'm asking for a specific example." "One visit where you went to see her simply because you wanted to spend time with her." It's hard to remember specific conversations, ... double quotes, "but you remember asking her to let you manage her art collection, don't you?" That was a legitimate offer to help her organize her assets for a commission of 15% of the collection's value. Uncle Charles's face reddened. "That's a standard fee for art management services." The contrast between their testimony and the evidence of my relationship with Millicent was stark. Elizabeth presented phone records showing that I had called Millicent multiple times per week, often just to check on her. She showed receipts proving that I had been buying her groceries, picking up her prescriptions, and paying for small household repairs. Mrs. Patterson, Millicent's neighbor, provided some of the most powerful testimony. "I watched that family for years," she said, from the witness stand. "Sarah was the only one who came regularly. She'd bring groceries, help with the garden, just sit and talk with Millicent for hours. The others only showed up when they wanted something." "How do you know they wanted something?" Elizabeth asked. "Because Millicent would tell me. She'd say, 'Victoria came by today asking for money for her business.' Or 'Robert wants me to invest in another restaurant.' She was hurt by it. She said they only saw her as a bank account." "What did she say about Sarah?" "She said Sarah was like the daughter she never had. She said Sarah visited because she cared, not because she wanted anything. Millicent loved that girl more than anyone else in the world." The third week of trial focused on the will itself and the circumstances surrounding its creation. Mr. Pemberton testified about his meetings with Millicent in the months before her death, describing her as lucid, determined, and very specific about her intentions. "She told me she had been thinking about this decision for years," he testified. She said she had watched her family and was disappointed by their focus on money rather than relationships. She said Sarah was different, that Sarah had shown her genuine love without expecting anything in return. "Did she express any doubts about her decision?" Elizabeth asked. "None whatsoever. She was more certain about this than any other legal decision I had ever helped her make. She said it was the most important thing she would ever do." The family's attorney tried to suggest that I had been present during these meetings and had influenced Millicent's decisions, but Mr. Pemberton shut down that line of questioning immediately. "Sarah was never present during any of our discussions about the will," he said firmly. "Millicent specifically asked that these meetings be confidential. Sarah had no knowledge of the will's contents until it was read after Millicent's death." On the fourth day of the third week, Elizabeth called me to the stand. I had been dreading this moment, knowing that the family's attorney would try to paint me as a manipulative gold digger who had taken advantage of a vulnerable old woman. Morrison's cross-examination was brutal. He questioned my motives for visiting Millicent, suggested that I had deliberately isolated her from the family, and implied that I had known about her wealth and had cultivated the relationship for financial gain. "Isn't it true, Miss Blackwood, that you were aware of your great-aunt's substantial wealth?" he asked. I knew she was comfortable, but I had no idea about the extent of her assets until the will was read. "But you knew she owned valuable antiques and artwork." "I knew she had nice things." "Yes. And you knew she had no children of her own to inherit her estate." "Yes, but I never thought about inheritance. I visited her because I cared about her." "How convenient. You cared about the one family member who happened to be the wealthiest." "I cared about her because she was kind to me when no one else in the family was," I said, feeling my anger rise. "She was the only person who ever made me feel like I belonged." Morrison continued his attack, but I could see that the jury was growing uncomfortable with his aggressive tactics. When Elizabeth stood for redirect examination, she gave me the opportunity to tell my side of the story. "Sarah, why did you visit your great-aunt so regularly?" she asked. "Because she was lonely, and I was lonely too. My family had always made me feel like an outsider, like I was a burden they had to tolerate. But Millicent never made me feel that way. She listened to me, she valued my opinions, she treated me like I mattered." "Did you ever ask her for money or financial assistance?" "Never, not once. I didn't visit her because I wanted something from her. I visited her because I loved her." "What did you think would happen to her estate when she died?" "I assumed it would go to Victoria and Amanda, or maybe be divided among all the grandchildren. I never imagined she would leave anything significant to me." "How did you feel when you learned about the inheritance?" I thought about that moment in the lawyer's office, the shock and disbelief, the weight of suddenly becoming wealthy. I felt honored that she had trusted me with her legacy. But I also felt sad because I realized that she had been more disappointed in the family than I had understood. She had been watching all of us, and she had made her decision based on what she observed. The closing arguments took place on a Friday afternoon. Morrison made one final attempt to portray me as a calculating manipulator who had taken advantage of a vulnerable elderly woman. But Elizabeth's closing argument was devastating in its simplicity. "Ladies and gentlemen," she said, "this case is not complicated. An elderly woman watched her family for years and made a decision about who deserved her legacy. She chose the one person who had shown her genuine love without expecting anything in return. She chose the one person who had visited her, not because they wanted something, but because they cared." Elizabeth walked over to the evidence table and picked up a photograph of Millicent and me at her 90th birthday party, both of us smiling genuinely at the camera. "This is what love looks like," she said, showing the photo to the jury. "Not the calculated visits when someone needs money. Not the phone calls asking for loans or investments. This is a great-aunt and her great-niece who genuinely cared about each other." She set the photo down and faced the jury directly. Millicent Blackwood made her choice deliberately and thoughtfully. She left her estate to Sarah because Sarah had earned it through years of genuine love and care. Don't let the family's disappointment and greed override the wishes of a wise woman who knew exactly what she was doing. The jury deliberated for 6 hours. When they returned to the courtroom, I could barely breathe as the foreman stood to read the verdict. "We find that the will of Millicent Blackwood is valid and was executed by a person of sound mind without undue influence. The will contest is denied." The courtroom erupted in noise, reporters scrambling to file their stories. Family members arguing loudly, supporters cheering, but I barely heard any of it. I sat in my chair, overwhelmed by relief and vindication. I had won. The inheritance was mine, legally and definitively. More importantly, a jury of 12 strangers had validated what I had always known, that my relationship with Millicent had been genuine, that her decision had been sound, and that I deserved the legacy she had left me. As I walked out of the courtroom with Elizabeth Chen, reporters shouted questions and cameras flashed. But I ignored them all. I had only one destination in mind, the house on Magnolia Street, where the deed with my name on it was waiting in the safe. The poor relative was gone forever. In her place stood Sarah Elizabeth Blackwood, heiress, homeowner, and the rightful inheritor of a legacy built on love rather than obligation. The family could call me whatever they wanted now, but they could never again call me poor. 6 months after the trial, I stood in the grand foyer of what was now officially and uncontestably my home, watching as workers installed a bronze plaque beside the front door. The plaque read, "The Millicent Blackwood Center for Community Development, established 2024 in memory of a woman who believed in the power of genuine kindness." The transformation of the house had taken months of careful planning, working with architects and designers who specialized in historic preservation. I had converted the mansion into a community center while maintaining its original character and charm. The formal dining room had become a meeting space for local nonprofits. The library housed a computer lab and tutoring center. The conservatory had been turned into a children's play area. But my favorite space was Millicent's old bedroom, which I had converted into my office. From the window, I could see the garden where we had spent so many afternoons, and her presence felt strongest there as I worked on the various philanthropic projects that now filled my days. The inheritance had indeed changed my life, but not in the ways my family had predicted. Instead of squandering the money or being overwhelmed by the responsibility, I had found my calling. The Millicent Blackwood Foundation, which I had established with $3 million from the estate, was already making a significant impact in the community. We provided grants to organizations serving low-income families, funded scholarships for first-generation college students, and supported programs that helped people escape poverty. It was the kind of work I had always wanted to do, but had never had the resources to pursue on a meaningful scale. My phone buzzed with a text from Dr. Patricia Reeves, the foundation's program director, whom I had hired away from a major national charity. "The mayor wants to meet next week about the Affordable Housing Initiative. Also, the Times wants to do a feature story about the foundation's first year." I smiled as I typed back, "Schedule both meetings. And make sure they understand that any story should focus on the work, not on me personally." The media attention had been intense in the months following the trial. I had been featured in magazines as an example of philanthropy done right and invited to speak at conferences about wealth and social responsibility. But I tried to keep the focus on the foundation's work rather than on my personal story. The irony wasn't lost on me that the family members who had once dismissed my career in social work were now trying to get involved with the foundation. Victoria had called several times, offering her expertise in real estate development for our affordable housing projects. Amanda had suggested that her law firm could provide legal services at a family discount. Uncle Robert had proposed a partnership between the foundation and his restaurant chain to provide job training for unemployed youth. I had politely declined all of their offers. The relationship with my family remained complicated. The trial had revealed truths that couldn't be unsaid, wounds that couldn't be easily healed. Some relatives had cut off contact entirely, unable to accept that the poor relative now controlled more wealth than they did. Others had attempted reconciliation, though their motives were often transparently self-interested. The only family relationship that had genuinely improved was with my mother. She had flown up from Florida for the trial and had been shocked by the testimony about how the family had treated me over the years. I had no idea it was that bad, she had told me afterward. I thought they were just, a little snobbish. I didn't realize they were actually cruel to you. You were dealing with your own grief after Dad died, I had said, and you needed to build a new life. I understand why you didn't see it. Now, she visited regularly, and we had developed the kind of close relationship I had always wanted but never thought possible. She had even moved back from Florida, buying a small house just a few miles from the mansion so she could be closer to me and help with the foundation's work. I'm proud of what you've built here, she had told me just last week as we walked through the community center during one of our evening programs. Millicent would be so happy to see how you're using her gift. The evening programs had become one of my favorite aspects of the center. 3 nights a week, we offered classes for adults, everything from basic computer skills to financial literacy to English as a second language. The students were mostly working parents trying to improve their job prospects, immigrants learning to navigate American systems, and elderly residents who wanted to stay connected in an increasingly digital world. Tonight was graduation night for our first financial literacy cohort, and I was looking forward to celebrating with the 23 students who had completed the 8-week program. Many of them reminded me of myself just 2 years ago, hardworking people who had never had access to the kind of financial education that wealthy families took for granted. As I prepared for the ceremony, I thought about how different my life had become. 2 years ago, I had been living paycheck to paycheck in a studio apartment, worried about student loan payments and whether I could afford to fix my car when it inevitably broke down. Now, I lived in a mansion worth millions and had more money than I could spend in several lifetimes. But the most significant change wasn't financial, it was psychological. I no longer felt like an outsider looking in, no longer felt like I had to apologize for my existence or be grateful for scraps of attention from people who considered themselves my betters. The inheritance had given me something more valuable than money. It had given me the confidence to be exactly who I was without apology. My phone rang, interrupting my thoughts. It was Elizabeth Chen, who had become not just my attorney, but a close friend. "Sarah, I have some interesting news," she said. "I just got a call from James Morrison, the lawyer who represented your family in the will contest. What did he want?" Apparently, Victoria is in some financial trouble. Her real estate development company is facing bankruptcy, and she's looking for investors. Morrison was calling to see if you might be interested in helping her out. I laughed, though there was no humor in it. Let me guess. She suddenly remembered that we're family, and family should help each other. Something like that. Morrison was very careful to frame it as a business opportunity rather than a request for charity. What did you tell him? I told him I'd pass along the message, but that I doubted you'd be interested. Was I right? I thought about Victoria, about the years of condescension and casual cruelty, about her testimony during the trial where she had accused me of manipulating a vulnerable old woman. I thought about the phone calls she had made after the inheritance, suddenly wanting to be involved in managing our family's wealth. You were right, I said. I'm not interested. I figured as much. But Sarah, I want you to think about something. You've built an incredible foundation. You're making a real difference in people's lives, and you've proven that you can handle wealth responsibly. But holding on to anger toward your family, that's not serving you anymore. I'm not angry, I said. Though even as I said it, I wasn't sure it was true. Maybe not angry, but you're still carrying hurt. And I understand why they treated you terribly for years, but you have the power now. You don't need their approval or acceptance anymore. Maybe it's time to consider what kind of relationship you want to have with them going forward. After Elizabeth hung up, I sat in Millicent's old office, thinking about her words. Was I still carrying hurt? Was I letting past wounds prevent me from moving forward completely? I pulled out the letter Millicent had left me and read it again, focusing on a passage I had overlooked before. I hope you will remember that the most valuable things in life cannot be bought or sold. Use this money wisely, help others as you have helped me, and never let wealth corrupt the beautiful soul that made me love you like the daughter I never had. Never let wealth corrupt the beautiful soul. Was holding on to resentment toward my family a form of corruption? Was I letting their past treatment of me prevent me from being the person Millicent had believed I could become? That evening, as I watched our financial literacy students receive their certificates, I made a decision. One of the students, Maria Santos, was a single mother who had been working 2 jobs while taking care of her elderly father. She had come to every class despite her exhausting schedule, determined to learn how to manage money better so she could provide a more stable life for her children. Miss Blackwood, she said as she shook my hand after receiving her certificate, I want to thank you for this program. I never understood things like credit scores and retirement planning before. Now I feel like I have some control over my financial future. You did the work, Maria. I just provided the opportunity, but you didn't have to. You could have just kept all that money for yourself. Instead, you're using it to help people like me. That says something about who you are. As the evening wound down and the last students departed, I found myself thinking about Maria's words. I had been given an extraordinary opportunity, not just the inheritance, but the chance to use it in ways that would have made Millicent proud. Was I living up to that opportunity fully if I was still carrying resentment toward people who had hurt me in the past? The next morning, I called Elizabeth Chen back. I've been thinking about what you said yesterday, I told her. About my family and moving forward, and I want to make Victoria an offer, not an investment in her business. I'm not interested in bailing out someone who made poor financial decisions, but I want to offer her a job. A job. Sarah, are you sure about this? The foundation needs someone with real estate expertise for our affordable housing initiative. Victoria has the skills, even if she doesn't have the character I'd prefer. I'm willing to give her a chance to prove that she can work for something bigger than her own profit. What kind of job are you thinking? Project manager for affordable housing development. Decent salary, good benefits, meaningful work. But she'd be working for me, taking direction from me, and she'd have to commit to the foundation's mission of serving low-income families. Elizabeth was quiet for a moment. That's either very generous or very clever. Maybe both. It's practical. I need someone with her skills, and she needs a job. More importantly, it gives her a chance to understand what I'm trying to do here, to see that wealth can be used for something other than accumulation. And if she says no, then she says no. But at least I'll know I offered her a chance to be part of something meaningful. I called Victoria that afternoon. She answered on the first ring, probably hoping I was calling about her business troubles. Sarah, I'm so glad you called. I was hoping we could talk about I heard about your company's financial problems, I interrupted. I'm not interested in investing, but I do have a job offer for you. There was a long pause. A job offer. The foundation needs a project manager for our affordable housing initiative. It's a full-time position with a salary of $85,000 plus benefits. You'd be responsible for identifying development opportunities, managing construction projects, and ensuring that we're creating quality housing that low-income families can afford. You want me to work for you? I want you to work for the foundation, for a cause that's bigger than either of us. Another pause. Sarah, I don't know what to say. You can say yes, or you can say no. But if you say yes, you need to understand that this isn't charity. I expect professional behavior, dedication to our mission, and a willingness to put the needs of the families we serve ahead of your own ego. And if I say no, then you say no, and we both move on with our lives. Victoria was quiet for a long time. When she finally spoke, her voice was smaller than I had ever heard it. I owe you an apology, Sarah, for the things I said during the trial, for the way I treated you over the years. I was jealous. I think jealous that Aunt Millicent loved you more than she loved the rest of us. And I was angry that you got something I thought I deserved. And now I'm facing bankruptcy and realizing that maybe I don't know as much about business as I thought I did. Maybe I could learn something from what you're doing here. Is that a yes? It's a yes. And Sarah, thank you for giving me a chance I probably don't deserve. After I hung up, I sat in my office looking out at the garden where Millicent and I had spent so many afternoons. I could almost see her there, smiling with approval at the choice I had made. The deed to the house sat framed on my desk now, a reminder of how far I had come from the poor relative who had been dismissed and diminished by her own family. But it was also a reminder that ownership of property, of wealth, of power came with responsibilities. I owned this house, but I was also its steward. I controlled this wealth, but I was also accountable for how I used it. I had the power to help or to hurt, to include or to exclude, to perpetuate old patterns or to create new possibilities. Millicent had trusted me with her legacy because she believed I would use it wisely. That meant not just funding good causes and helping people in need, but also modeling the kind of grace and forgiveness that she had shown me when the rest of the family had written me off. 6 months later, I stood in the same spot where this journey had begun, the conference room at Pemberton, Hayes and Associates, but this time, I wasn't there for a will reading. I was there to sign the papers establishing the Millicent Blackwood Endowment, a permanent fund that would ensure the foundation's work could continue long after I was gone. Mr. Pemberton, now in his 80s but still sharp, smiled as he witnessed my signature on the documents. Millicent would be very proud of what you've accomplished, he said. She always believed you were special, you know? Even when you were just a little girl, she would tell me that you had something the rest of the family lacked. What was that? Heart, he said simply. She said you had a good heart, and that was rarer and more valuable than all the business acumen in the world. As I drove home to the mansion that had once seemed impossibly grand and now felt like home, I thought about the journey that had brought me here. 2 years ago, I had been the poor relative, dismissed and diminished by a family that measured worth by wealth. Today, I was the founder of a successful foundation, the owner of a beautiful home, and the employer of several family members who had once looked down on me. But the most important transformation wasn't in my bank account or my address. It was in my understanding of what it meant to belong, to matter, to have worth that couldn't be measured in dollars and cents. The deed with my name on it had been the beginning, not the end. It had given me the power to choose who I wanted to be and how I wanted to use the gifts I had been given. And I had chosen to be someone who lifted others up rather than putting them down. Someone who created opportunities rather than hoarding them. Someone who understood that true wealth came from the connections we build and the difference we make in other people's lives. They had called me the poor relative, and in many ways, they had been right. I had been poor, not in money, but in confidence, in belonging, in the belief that I deserved good things. But Millicent's gift had made me rich in all the ways that truly mattered. The deed was just a piece of paper, but it represented something much more valuable, the knowledge that I was worthy of love, respect, and trust. And that was a legacy that no one could ever take away from me. As I pulled into the driveway of my home, I saw Victoria's car parked near the community center entrance. She was working late again, probably reviewing plans for our next affordable housing project. The transition hadn't been easy. Old habits and attitudes died hard, but she was learning to find satisfaction in work that served others rather than just herself. The lights were on throughout the mansion. Not because I was wasteful with electricity, but because the building was alive with activity. Evening classes were in session, support groups were meeting, and families were using the community spaces I had created from rooms that had once been reserved for the wealthy elite. This was what Millicent had envisioned when she left me her fortune, not just the preservation of a beautiful house, but its transformation into something that served the community. She had seen potential in me that I hadn't seen in myself, and she had given me the resources to fulfill that potential. The poor relative was gone, replaced by someone who understood that true wealth wasn't about what you owned, but about what you gave away. And as I walked up the steps to my front door, past the bronze plaque honoring the woman who had believed in me when no one else would, I felt richer than I had ever imagined possible. The deed had my name on it. But the legacy belonged to everyone whose life had been touched by Millicent's gift and my determination to use it well.